Hello, everyone, and welcome to Collision Repair Magazine's Industry Insider Radio, a podcast for shops, shop owners, techs, and every level of the collision repair industry. I'm your host, James Kerr. It's a simple repair. The parts are common. That car should have been in and out in no time. So why has it been taking up space in your shop for days? The customer's angry, your turnaround times are wrecked, and all you can do is wait, spending money. In the last 2 years, this has become a common story for collision repair shops. The parts shortage and struggles with the supply chain are making simple repairs difficult or seemingly impossible. My guest today is here to engage us on building solutions to the supply chain shortage, as we all work towards a stronger future in collision repair. This episode is brought to you by LKQ, industry leader in alternative and specialty parts for the collision repair industry. For more information on LKQ, please visit www.lkqcorp.com. That's LKQcorp.com.
Hi, I'm Dayle Thys. I've been in the industry for 16 years, but also grew up within the recycling industry and joined LKQ as part of an acquisition in 2010. My current title is District Manager, overseeing both sales and operations for District C3, which is Western Canada, and more specifically, Manitoba to British Columbia.
Okay, Dayle, we're talking about the parts shortage and supply chain today, something that is a big deal for a lot of shops, maybe for every shop, given what we've been going through. Let's provide some context. From your perspective, what are collision repair shops facing today with supply chain problems and parts shortages?
I've participated in numerous industry events this year where association representatives and insurers have communicated significantly increased length of repair statistics, primarily surrounding parts supply. It seems no matter where I travel or who I speak to in other districts, this is a common challenge for the industry today.
How did we get into this mess? I mean, I know this is maybe very obvious for anybody listening, but let's lay out the history. What happened? How did we get into a parts shortage crisis?
Well, I believe the start when the problem was most prevalent to the industry and the period where efforts and actions were taken to counteract the shortage are three very distinct transitions within the challenge period. The major contributing factor to the challenge obviously started with the pandemic, and this seemed to have a domino effect on the supply chain. As the pandemic loosened its grapple hold, we saw average miles start to increase through the latter half of 2021 and into Q1 of 2022. This resulted in increased demand for parts at the height of the collision repair industry seasonality of Q1. This unfortunately coincided with some of the most challenging times within the supply chain. I feel that Q1 2022 was when the parts availability was at its worst. The challenges to correct the problem followed with massively inflated costs to solidify placement on container ships to replenish inventory to the demand.
So do you think that this is just the pandemic kicked a domino effect into occurring, or do you think this has had it was coming? It was already in the wind? Like, you're on the inside here, Dayle, so I just want to pick your brain. Is this just how it expressed itself, or is it the pandemic's fault, ultimately?
I think a lot of it had to do with the pandemic, whether it was port labor shortages overseas, or, as a result of supply and demand, massively inflated container costs. Really, the pandemic kicked off the course of events and, kind of dominoed into multiple different challenges. But I do believe it was mostly centered around the pandemic.
Because I've heard people say that there's a few contributing factors. Some people want to blame the large container ship. They got stuck. Some people want to blame the fact that the international market is so screwy. So sometimes it's a lot more profitable to take parts out of the country, leaving us with a shortage. Do you think those two things are factoring in as well? Or does it really just boil down to the bad timing of the pandemic and how it lines up with the seasons?
Yeah, I really think it's primarily the pandemic. We, as LKQ, I can only really speak for ourselves here, but we did everything we could to possibly support the industry and bring in more inventory. It was, there was just multiple challenges in order to do so that hindered us from doing so, and we got extremely creative, to be honest with you, to try and resolve the issue or work around some of the port challenges and so on and so forth.
So would you say that the kind of parts infrastructure is a delicate system and then this just knocked it out of balance? Or was this just such a massive disruption that even a robust system would be knocked and thrown for a loop?
Well, yeah, really the parts industry is no different than most. It centers around labor. And so if the labor is not available to produce the parts, it's pretty challenging to keep up with the demand. And once again, I think the pandemic is really, at fault for those labor challenges and is the stem of the issue.
Mm-hmm. So how does this manifest on the shop floor? How do people feel the squeeze with these parts shortages?
Shops live and breathe cycle time on repair planning. Before the supply chain challenges, on average, parts availability was consistent and dependable. As soon as this is disrupted, it causes inaccuracy in repair planning, scheduling challenges, and ultimately extended length of repair time. Ultimately, this results in dissatisfaction of the insured and profitability challenges for the industry. I really believe that, you know, the industry is very used to a set platform of repair, and it's really not very manipulable, where you can't really change it very much if you want to still perform to the same level of length of repair as you did pre-pandemic. So really, it boiled down to scheduling. Those who really, were most successful, I believe, in maintaining their length of repair, really put a lot of work into their scheduling up front, determined all of their timelines for their parts beforehand, and obviously, maintain their level of repair time then.
I understand shops are very frustrated about this because it's something entirely out of their hands. And one comment that I've gotten from shops is, back in the day, if we ran into a problem like this, we used to be creative with how we approached a repair. But with OEM specifications the way they are now, there is no latitude for being creative in a repair. You need that part, you need only that part, and you need to get it. And what are you supposed to do about it?
Yeah, really. Once again, LKQ's cross section of parts that we offer is quite wide and deep. We do everything we can to always maintain a minimum quantity on hand to service the industry. At times, though, we do have to reach out further into our network in order to access that part. Once again, we've done everything we could through the pandemic through the supply chain shortages to maintain minimum quantity on hands and always have, the most demanded parts available at all times for the industry. But, your point, I do see this frustration and I do understand the shop's challenges, because not only do they need to, find the part that they need, they also need to meet the savings metrics that the insurers bring forward for them to meet in alternative parts usage. So it's quite the juggle, I do believe. I do believe it's a lot better today than it's ever been. But once again, it was a challenge, I'm sure.
When you say today, better today than it's ever been, do you mean in terms of parts availability?
Yes, I do. We've done a lot to increase our level of inventory. Really, we through the latter half of Q3, we actually got really creative where the port companies and the container companies were really only allowing containers to be centralized to certain ports, the main ports within North America. So, for example, Los Angeles. And what we actually did is, due to this challenge, the drayage companies, or the companies that move the container between the port and the location of destination, were not offering that transport service, just due to the fact that they had so much demand. And so what we did as LKQ is we actually centralized locations in those major port cities to offload the containers, reload the product onto 53-foot semi-trailers, and then distribute that product throughout all of North America. So what this did for us is, or as an example, Q1 to Q4 in my district, our fill rate our inventory on hand has increased by 110%. So we as well had to get extremely creative in finding solutions for these challenges, and I do believe it was successful. Our fill rate is in a far better position today than it's been for the last 2 years, and as is our off-the-shelf rate, which means is the part in the right place for the time of sale for the collision shop, and are we filling that locally? So we've done a lot to increase our level of inventory, and it's come at a massive cost. There was times where the containers were costing in excess of $20,000 to transport, and that is far inflated compared to the traditional rate.
So just to be clear, the LKQ strategy was you set up shop in new cities that had major ports that would receive these containers, just so that you could pass them on to different supply points?
Kind of, yeah. But what we did is we actually used our locations. So, for example, Los Angeles, there's a location there. The drayage company would only, deliver within a certain distance of the port. So once again, we used that location, we used their labor. They very graciously unloaded and reloaded all of these products for us, and then we shipped them up to Western Canada to service, the collision industry.
My heart goes out to the shops when there's only so much you can do. Like there's only so many phone calls you can make. There's only so many, to keep everything above board and to OEM specs and making sure that you've got all of your bases covered. But LKQ took it in hand to set up like little distribution hubs in order to get the products and to massively increase your catalog so that things were more likely to be available. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
That's wild. Okay. Well, so that's LKQ's response to the parts shortage. How does that differ? Without casting aspersions around, how does that differ from what the rest of the industry? How the rest of the industry responded? Do you think? What makes LKQ's response unique?
Well, I really think that situations such as this can be viewed as a challenge or an opportunity. LKQ viewed it as an opportunity, regardless of the cost load associated to it. So really, LKQ's investment during uncertain times would be the largest difference. While others were weathering the storm, waiting for the inflationary pressures to pass, LKQ was negotiating and taking every opportunity to increase inventory on hand, while also assuming the inflated transport costs to do so. An example of this was that transload initiative that I just spoke to, where we offloaded containers, reloaded them onto semi-trailers and redistributed. But actually, the other half and the unsung hero in the whole scenario was the recycled division of LKQ. In the early stages of the corporation, LKQ recognized the potential of this highly fragmented industry and centralized inventory to increase fill rate and say yes to the industry more often. Today, LKQ is the largest dismantler of vehicles globally, producing over 800,000 cars annually at over 170 locations. The recycling industry continues to play a massive role in maintaining fill rate to the collision repair industry, and this was more prevalent than ever through the declined availability of the supply chain produced solutions. We saw large shifts towards the recycled solutions by the industry. And in many scenarios, actually, throughout the course of the pandemic, we were working very closely with either shops or insurers to try to save cars. And there was instances where, we were actually shipping a door all the way from Texas to Manitoba to service, a request and try and save a job and save a vehicle. So that was another large factor is the recycling industry is not supply chain,
like supply chain ready.
Yeah, and is available to everyone with local production. So
the other response then of LKQ is to strengthen integration with the parts recycling arm. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Wild.
We've always, offered both solutions to the collision repair industry. Tried to be a one-stop shop solution where you could order both your aftermarket and your recycled solutions from one store.
So you say unsung heroes. Are you making a big deal out of this outrageous capital investment to try and make parts more available? Because I understand where you're coming from. The only solution, given the balance of how collision repair shops are set up to work, seems to be to make sure that there's more parts out there. And obviously that would have been done at a huge risk to LKQ. I don't want to toot your horn too much, but is this part of your marketing now? Or are you saying, hey guys, we we did all this, or are you just remaining unsung heroes?
Well, obviously the cost associated to all of these strategic solutions was very, very high, and it's been something that we've been challenged to overcome. But I do believe it's positioned us and postured us as the number one solution in the industry. So, to be honest, it was an investment, but I do believe once again that the investment will hold true and we'll find our return.
Are you worried about getting stuck with a whole bunch of parts once everything's clear? Or are you looking on this as, hey, this is a bold, new, better way of structuring this parts issue?
I would answer that with, we are very good at forecasting the highest demanded parts that are required within the collision repair industry. Generally speaking, about one third of our stock on hand in a warehouse turns every 30 days or so. The other part of those solutions are slower turning demanded parts that are demanded by the industry, just not quite as often. So our platform and our offering is deep and wide. But once again, I do feel we are very good at identifying what is required and only investing into those solutions. So typically, we are putting the right parts on the shelf, and therefore, I'm not very concerned about not selling them.
So what this is coming down to is good categorization, parts organization, general logistics organization, forecasts, and transportation, like solid transportation solutions. You need to hammer everything out in pretty fine detail to be in a good position with that.
Yeah, it's a very intricate algorithm, this industry, to actually supply the correct parts, have the correct parts on the shelf where they need to be, and meet the demands of the industry. There's many parts that we hold, and it's a very in-depth algorithm, as I stated, to forecast what is required and mitigate as much risk as possible.
Because on the shop side, I think sometimes that's hard to see. What they see is they're making a phone call for a part or an email or whatever, what have you, and it should be a simple part, and then there's nothing. Nothing's happening. But meanwhile, there's a huge circus of activity happening behind the scenes through people like LKQ to try and source these things, right?
Correct. Yeah. And once again, most of these parts are being produced in Taiwan and shipped over to North America. And you can imagine the lead time associated to that production and transportation. And it's not a replenish, just call up the container company tomorrow and have all these parts replenished. So we're continually measuring and forecasting our minimum quantity on hands and our most necessary parts to service the industry, and assuring that we have them as required.
But also, it's like standing on top of a ball, right? Because if I can use that analogy, because the way things used to work pre-pandemic, shipping is completely different now in terms of logistics and costs and how much it gets factored in. Has LKQ positioned itself for how the world is going to be going forward into the future?
Well, there's only so much of a crystal ball that we can have. I do feel we are best postured that we've been throughout the whole pandemic or the whole supply chain shortage. I do feel that we'll probably hold a little bit more inventory going forward, to just have a little bit better health and not be as real time dependent on replenishment. But once again, we really depend on our logistical system as well to share inventory between locations, use our depth and coverage of inventory across all the country to supply. And we share inventory every day between locations to meet the demands of the industry. So once again, if one warehouse doesn't have it, there's always typically a part solution elsewhere, just with a slightly extended ETA to it.
Well, we're talking huge distances here, right? The examples you've been citing have been international, but even just nationally, our country is huge. Are there differences between locations in how parts shortages and the structures have manifested? I know you're central to the prairies. Are the prairies considerations for part shortage and supply chain issues different in the prairies than they are on the east or west?
Slightly, yes. The prairies offer an environment of dispersed population over large expanses of geography. This environment challenges utilizing shared inventory to produce increased fill rate to service customers' demands. We are currently investigating logistical initiatives to address these challenges, but first chose to attack replenishment with a 60% increase in fill rate and a 47% increase in off-the-shelf rate Q4 versus Q1 2022. But to your point, currently in the West, in the prairies, we don't have an internal distribution model set up with our own trucks running between locations every day, as we do in the East. As I stated, we are looking at that opportunity for the West. But once again, it's a large, challenging project because of just the distances between markets. So at this time, we're using common carriers to distribute those products. But it's obviously it comes with its own set of challenges as well. So you're right, it is a challenge in the West, slightly more than in the East.
So Dayle, I'm really interested in how much of what LKQ has done, like this has been LKQ's response to the parts shortage and the pandemic. And I think it's good for shops to get a sense of what people are doing behind the scenes, or at least outside of the scenes of the shop, to try and address these problems. How much of this, as far as you can tell, was perpetuated by the pandemic, and how much of this is just what we were going to have to do anyway going into the future?
I once again, I really believe a lot of this had to do with the pandemic. Our replenishment rate pre-pandemic was probably best in class. It really was the logistical challenges and the labor challenges through the pandemic that created these shortages. But I'll go back to my statement of repair planning and working together, both as parts supplier and repair shop or collision repair shop. Um, you know, simple communication is the number one key. I've seen certain shops really struggle through the pandemic with the shortage because they haven't really adapted to the fact that parts are not as available as they typically were. Whereas other shops have, manipulated their repair planning and scheduling process and, have really assured that they work with our reps, work with ourselves, make sure that we identify when the parts can be available. There's been scenarios where we are even holding inventory on hand a little bit preemptive to the scheduled repair and then delivering it closer to the day of. It's really about communication and working together, I think, is the number one solution. And I do feel we're going to be better postured than ever as we come through this challenge. But once again, I think if there's anything we need to learn from it, it's that we need to work together a little closer and communicate a little bit more.
Some shops, you say, are gaming the parts shortage issue, and some shops are lagging behind. What do those shops that are lagging behind need to know in order to be able to better weather this parts shortage issue?
I guess simply that not all parts are available locally, and typically we do have a 90+% fill rate at LKQ. It's just not necessarily next day. We will always typically have a solution. It's just the solution needs to fit the timeline that the shop has conceived as their targeted solution, right, or the targeted repair plan. So if they don't manipulate the repair plan slightly, the parts availability is going to affect them more than ever.
So you're saying your advice to shops is be flexible with timelines?
Be flexible with timelines, communicate with our reps, assure that when you're scheduling a job for the insured to come in, that you maybe have done the repair plan already, investigated all the parts solutions, and assured that that they're all meeting the schedule that's aligned to the insured. So once again, if we don't communicate and we don't really assure that we're covering what's necessary for the repair, then it's just not going to work out.
Well, as you said earlier in the interview, cycle time is king, right? That is the most paramount consideration. And the best cycle time estimates deal with trying to figure out how long the different components are going to take, and parts are part of that. I don't know how much shops can really consider that a variable, but it sounds like some shops are working that system well and some shops are lagging behind. But as an industry, what do you think that we should learn from all of this? Do you think there's a lesson to be learned, or is this just the whims of parts fate?
I'm not really even sure how to answer that one.
Well, yeah, let me tell you where I'm coming from. It sounds like a lot of the things that LKQ has been doing and a lot of the things we can take from the industry as a whole is tightening the screws on these processes, having very careful methods of categorization and forecast and analyzing and bringing things under house control like transportation and taking a proactive perspective on transportation issues. Converting shops or setting up shops or converting things as access points is a really forward-thinking, dynamic thing to do, to take ownership within the industry for trying to solve these things, rather than just sitting on your laurels and saying, "Oh well, it'll work itself eventually." Like, that's a great dynamic solution. But as an industry, could we have possibly seen this coming? Could we have possibly planned for this? Or was this just something that we had to respond to, even if it was on our back heels?
I think it's something we had to respond to, but once again, with every challenge is a solution. And, we, to your point, we can either sit and say, oh, this is a challenge and this is a struggle. What am I going to do? or we could take action, right? And I think it's just being as proactive as possible. That is really what we need to learn from this. We need to continually look at the environment surrounding us and change and adapt.
The part shortage is very much alive right now. It's something that we're going through, and it's getting better bits by bits, although some days it doesn't feel like it. But I don't want to say there's a better tomorrow, but it sounds like the kind of proactive decisions made by LKQ, if they're indicative of the wider industry, are setting us up for a better tomorrow. It's not that there is an end in sight. It's that we're going to have better processes, because better processes are already happening. Is that what it sounds like to you too?
Yeah, we're continually investing into better processes, expanding inventory, dismantling more cars, holding more inventory at every warehouse. So we are continually as LKQ doing everything we can to support the part of the puzzle that we hold as in the solution.
Well, it sounds like you did a little bit more than just within your part of the puzzle to take not drastic action, but fair action towards transportation issues of parts and to try and work around that issue. The sense I'm getting from you is you don't think there needs to be some kind of drastic upheaval or change within the industry in order to solve the part shortage, but that the solutions are kind of already in place, having more inventory, increasing communication, increasing methods of transportation. Like, this is the solution as far as you're concerned?
Well, I feel pre-pandemic and pre-supply chain shortage, the industry was in a pretty respectable position on this whole aspect. So I feel like really we need to get back to that, but we need to take what we've learned from this, and if we thread that those lessons into the model we were running pre-pandemic, I think we'll have a far stronger model to run and support the industry.
Well, Dayle, you've given me a little bit of hope here for the industry and for its future in terms of operating principles. It sounds great, because the thing is, you can get really claustrophobic in this, right? When you're sitting in the shop and your part's not coming in, you don't know why it's not coming in. You've got a car taking up space. You got to figure out where to put the darn car that you could easily repair if you had the right part. It can feel pretty hopeless. But the reality, from what you're saying, is actually a lot more hopeful.
I think so. And once again, I just encourage everybody to continue trying, right? One thing I think people don't necessarily understand about the parts supply industry is that the inventory is continually changing. And one of the initiatives we also took on this year as LKQ is asking our reps who are talking to the shops on a daily basis to ask the question of, what are you waiting on for back order? And, is there something I can look into for you to try and find that solution? Because once again, we're buying recycling vehicles every day across all of North America. Just because that solution wasn't available yesterday doesn't mean it's available, that it won't be available tomorrow. So I really think that we just need to keep communicating and keep working on those challenges together, because once again it's the availability is very, very large. It's just a matter of linking the requirement to a solution, right?
Pre-pandemic, it seemed like there was a pretty big dividing line between parts and aftermarket parts. Do you think that line has gotten a little bit fuzzier, that people are more willing to explore alternative parts sourcing now?
I think so. I think our aftermarket parts, the quality is spot on. Recycled is basically OE parts, right? So I've never understood why there would be any hesitation towards alternative parts. Some shops use them very, very well to increase their margins, and it's very lucrative for them that way. It boils down to profitability and maintaining a standard of quality, and I think that LKQ has invested greatly into that standard of quality, and hence then is a great solution for the industry.
It's just good, Dayle. It's really good to get the other half of the puzzle, right? It's good to hear from LKQ. It's good to hear from you about what's going on behind the scenes, and know that we're all one industry working together, that everyone is working to solve these problems, that it's not a every man for himself kind of industry. And certainly LKQ sounds like it hasn't been acting like an every man for itself kind of industry. That makes me feel a little bit better about collision repair as a whole.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as is the case with any problem, very rarely do they sort themselves out. Resolution requires investment into addressing the problem, which will produce a solution. I really feel at LKQ we're investing into the solution to partner and support the industry.
Well, investing in the industry as a whole, yeah, working together seems to be the motto that's going across all this.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dayle, I understand there's a video, some kind of video going around that's quite popular. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, there's a TV series by John Holden where LKQ was featured as an example of the recycling industry for the automotive vehicles. As I stated, LKQ dismantles over 800,000 cars a year, and is the largest global dismantler of vehicles in the world. So this is a really cool video. I really encourage everybody to check it out. It really helps understand the recycled operations of LKQ and what LKQ does to support the industry with end-of-life vehicles as well. So,
well, we'll put the link in the description. Dayle, 800,000 a year. You realize you're dismantling more cars than, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 50 years ago were being built in a year.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's astronomical. I grew up, as I stated, I grew up in the recycling industry, and I'm just extremely proud to be part of such a large entity, because ultimately it's supporting the whole world and being responsible as well.
Well, Dayle, thank you very much for being with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining me today, Dayle Thys of LKQ. Any final thoughts you want to end with before I roll this out?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining me today on Collision Repair Magazine's Industry Insider Radio. I'm James Kerr. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening: Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or YouTube. And tune in next time for another episode of Industry Insider Radio. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. This episode is brought to you by LKQ, industry leader in alternative and specialty parts for the collision repair industry. For more information on LKQ, please visit www.lkqcorp.com. That's LKQcorp.com. Thank you.